Alright, hi, my name is Brooklyn, and today I'm going to be talking about the first female to obtain a PhD in psychology. So just before I get started, I want to give a brief overview of what I'll be talking about. So I'm going to start off with some background information about society and education for women during this time, and then I'm going to talk about Margaret Washburn, who she was and kind of what she did, and then I'll end with talking about the impact she had on psychology and society. So starting with the society of during this time of the 19th and 20th century, white males kind of dominated society of America, and any other race or gender was considered a subordinate group to them. Men were allowed to own property, vote, receive an education at any level, and were expected to provide for their family, whereas women were not allowed to do any of these things, and the role of woman was really to marry, become a mother, cook, clean, and maintain the house, and behave in ways that were passive and compliant to her husband. Anything outside of these roles was not allowed. So leading into the education for women, so the opportunity to actually receive a formal education was not available until the mid to late 1800s. However, this doesn't mean that any woman could go out and pursue an education. There are many educational barriers. So one, it was only available to women who came from white middle class families. It was many higher educational institutions. Educations would not even admit them because of the fact that they were women, and the very few that did only allowed them to attend as informal or special students. Another educational barrier was society, so a lot of questions arose, theories, so like the greater variability theory towards women held them back, and society kind of really pushed back and created this barrier to pursue what they wanted to, and there was an intolerable choice, which was a dilemma where women had to choose between pursuing an education or marriage, and if they decided marriage, they had to marry and abandon the professional world. So introducing who Margaret Floyd Washburn was, she was a woman who came from a white middle class family, and she was an only child. She began her academic career in 1878 at 7 years old, and throughout her academic career path, she kind of encountered several restraints and barriers due to her being a woman. And instead of giving up, she responded to these by continuing as if gender made no difference. And in her case, it seemed to have worked relatively well, which I'll get into, because later on she became the first woman to obtain a PhD in psychology. So I wanted to give an overview of her educational timeline. So obviously, like I said, she was born in 1871, and in 1878 is when she kind of first started at 7 years old. She first attended a private school next door to her home, and then in 1886, at the age of 15, Washburn graduated from high school. And the following fall, at the age of 16, Washburn began attending Vassar College, and she spent 5 years here. Her first year was kind of preparatory because she lacked some of the entrance requirements. And after graduating from Vassar College in 1891, she wanted to continue to further her education at Columbia University. However, Columbia had not opened its door to admission for women. So she had to convince the trustees and other people at Columbia University to attend these lectures, and finally, after convincing them, she was permitted to attend James McKean Cattell's classes. However, Columbia refused to permit her as a regular student, and so she spent the next year attending Cattell's lectures as just an auditor. Cattell actually played the role I like to think of as her mentor, because he looked at her as just like another student, didn't look at her as just like a woman. He required and expected the same things from her as he expected from any of her other peers who were also men. And then Cattell I like to think he started realizing what she was capable of, and he advised Washburn to actually apply to Cornell University. And so in 1892, following her acceptance, Washburn began studying under E.B. Tishner, I think that's how you pronounce it, at Cornell University. And so then 2 years later, in 1894, she became the first woman to actually obtain a PhD in psychology. So how did her achievement impact anyone else other than her is kind of a big question. Well, she contributed to psychology through her theories and publications. She also kind of showed what women can actually bring to the field, and that we weren't just, we weren't just supposed to can't think of the word, basically playing the roles of what society had laid out for us. She also became a professor, taught classes too, and she allowed joint publications with their students who were also women, which kind of encouraged them to continue pursuing what they wanted to, even if they were marginalized, because again, women during this time were marginalized and were basically kind of trying to be prevented from continuing pursuing what they wanted to. And her success is said to have placed Vassar College on the psychological map because of like all the stuff that she achieved. I didn't really talk about a lot of it just because of time. She also, in 1920s, when she was still teaching at Vassar College, she helped prevent the start of this introduction special courses that Vassar College wanted to, and it was basically designed to teach womanly arts, so like family life, marriage, maternity, nutrition, all that stuff. And I think mainly she tried to prevent it because she thought that, again, women were capable of doing so much more, and like it was kind of be a step in the like back rather than forward. And kind of like ending, I kind of think that she was the initial start to breaking these barriers around women in advanced education and training, because today women make up 76% of new psychology doctorates, 74% of early career psychologists, and 53% of the psychology workforce. These are my references. Is there any questions?
Could you talk a little bit about what the transition might have been like for her from going from Columbia University all the way to Cornell University? Like, what was that transition like?
So Columbia to where? Cornell?
To Cornell. Where, yeah.
So basically, based on like the research I did, I think Cattell kind of more had to like convince her, because Columbia, I can't remember the exact name, but had like a joint university with like a women's college. Mm-hmm. And I think Cattell kind of knew that she was more capable and that Columbia wouldn't be able to offer what she was fully capable of. And I think like with her actually going and pursuing at Cornell, Cornell, she was able to lay out this groundwork. And I feel like if she would have stayed at Columbia, she would have just fallen into the same pathway as Mary Calkins did and a few other people. So does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Perfect. Anyone else?
Go ahead, Ashley.
So you talked about like time restraints on the limitations of what she did. So what were some like the things that she studied? Was it focused mainly on women, or was it? Like
no, so she actually, growing up, her family really supported her in actually pursuing education, which also is part of the reason how she got so far, because again, she came from a middle class white family, so she had that advantage. But again, like she was a woman, she also had to choose between the intolerable choice, so marriage versus a career, and she actually for a while considered marrying a philosopher at one of the university who was also one of her peers. So she had to face that, and then she also studied music. That was one of them. I can't remember the exact what she studied, just because mainly my research topic was kind of what she did and how she did and how it impacted. But she went through a lot of the same areas that I kind of talked about. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Perfect. Carson. Oh.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Carson.
I was just gonna ask, like, so after she got her PhD, did that spark like a huge, like the next year were a lot more women in psychology getting it, or was it more of a duration, just kind of spread out?
I mean, it's kind of, so she got a lot of mixed reactions. So from like some people were like accepting of it. So like in some of like the research that I read, some people like her peers were really accepting of it, and it was because mainly she had a lot of really good interactions with different, like even though she went to all those universities, she withheld like a lot of the same connections with them. However, there were still some people who kind of like pushed back, like society especially, just because again women weren't supposed to be doing this during this time. So.